Alright, let's see how useContext and useReducer work together in the context of an online glasses store. It's a basic store with some pre-populated data. We've got a simple, clean shop front where you can add a product to the basket, and we have a basket showing what we've added and the total price. The focus is to show how useReducer is interwoven with useContext. So without further ado, let's get started. If you want to understand more about useContext and useReducer separately, there's a video for each, and I'll leave a card in the video and some links in the description below. I've done npx create React app. Now let's install Tailwind CSS. And then let's install React Router DOM. Tidy up our workspace. Our app.js will be setting up the router, the routes, and route. So we import it first from React Router DOM. And if you've watched the previous videos, you know that there are different types of routers available. Browser router is the most common, but there is also hash router and memory router. If you're deploying to GitHub IO, due to the GitHub Pages quirks, you have to use hash router. But generally speaking, browser router is more than okay. So we have our browser router wrapping around routes, which in turn wraps around route. Within each route that we want to set up, it's best that we have the pages ready first. So let's create a folder called pages and create two files, a basket.js and a home.js. RAFCE to set it up. Then back in our app.js, in our first route, we have to give it a path name. Because this will be our home page, we can just leave it as a / like this. Then we need to tell it where to go. That's where element comes in. So element equals curly braces, and then we have our homepage file that we've just created. We do the same for our basket, except the path name is just / basket. Then element is the basket file. If we npm start, we can see the word home. Let's just dress it up a bit. Let's say h1 tag and useContext and useReducer store. A little bit of styling. Looks good. As for our data, I've just picked out some image links from this glasses site and conjured up some names and prices at the top of my head. There's a bit of a lag from my Bluetooth keyboard, and it's probably not a very good use of everyone's time to see me type everything out. So I'll probably end up forwarding this bit, but in real life, this will be the data that you get from a database. Okay, now that our data is done, I'm just going to set up a navbar component. In our components folder, I'll add a new file called navbar.jsx. In this navbar, we can start utilizing the routes that we had set up in our app.js. So we can use link from React Router DOM, and it works like an A tag. So now we have navigation links to home and basket. Let's add this navbar to our homepage so we can actually see it and style it. Just something very simple. Then in our home page, we want to display our products. Let's have a subheading called new in H2. Add some styling. Then we can import our store data and map our data. To display each item, we should have a product component, which we'll create right now. RAFCE to set it up. We give it a key and pass through each item into our product component where we will receive it. And then we can display the data. First, let's show the image. The source will be item.image because that's where we've added the link to the images in our data file. And it's missing a return value. Let's go back to home.js and have a look. It shouldn't have the curly braces here. There we go. Now we can see the quirky glasses. Whilst we're here, let's wrap this up in a div and do some styling. So up until a large screen, it'll just display a column one by one. But from a large screen onwards, we'll display it in a grid. Cool. Now it's responsive. Back in product.jsx, let's show the item name and item price. Add some styling. For our image, let's add an alt text and call it glasses for now. And I'll just restructure it a little bit. Now we have something a bit more presentable. We've got our product image, product name, product price, and a button that says Add to Basket. Everything we need for a responsive online shopfront. Now we can get to the good bit, the useContext and useReducer. Let's create these files first in a separate folder. I'm just going to call it context and reducer. And the file name for useContext is generally camel casing, but with a capitalized first letter, also known as Pascal casing. And the file name for reducers is generally camel casing, I believe. It doesn't make that much sense to me why this is, but let's go for it. In our store context.js here, let's import create context from React first, and then we can create our store context like this. Export const store context equals create context. Easy. And then let's do our provider here. Eventually what this becomes is the context provider in the same way that we used one in the useContext video. If you remember, we added the context provider in our app.js, and that was fine because we were dealing with something super simple. The useContext at that time only had a hard-coded user and set user. This time we have a bit more going on, so let's do it slightly differently. Let's keep it together with our store context.js file. To do this, we need to export const store provider. You can call it store context provider or a similarly sensible name that shows that this is the context provider. And we need to accept children here in curly braces. This is how it'll allow us to plant it into our app.js later, but that'll come later. And I will come back and summarize. Before we get to that stage, inside here, we'll actually have our useReducer stuff. So let's head over to reducer.js and set up some of the key stuff that we'll need, which first of all is an initial state object. We need to export this because we'll need it in our store context.js later. So in our initial state object, we have a total, which will be our total price, and that will be 0 to start with. And we'll have an array of products, which will be empty to start with. Then we have our store reducer, which accepts two parameters, state and action. In our callback function, we have a switch statement. If you find yourself asking why switch statement, I recommend watching the useReducer video first. So in our switch statement, we have our switch variable of action.type as per usual. And for our case variable, the three main actions that we'll want to take is to add a product to our basket, remove a product from our basket, and to calculate the total price, right? Let's start with add. If we're adding to our basket, we want to return the current state and set products as action.payload. Remember, payload is just a fancy lingo for information being carried. And we'll deal with the action.payload in our store context. So that's it for add. And then if we want to remove from basket, it's exactly the same. We return our current state and set products as action.payload. And that's what we need to do here, because what action.payload involves, i.e. the specific removal method, will be dealt with later in our store context file. Then we have update price. This will be the calculation for the total price in the basket. We return current state and set total this time as opposed to products. So total is action.payload. And if none of our action types match the case variables, it will fall back to default, where we will throw an error and give it a message like cannot match case in reducer or something. This bit is for the developer to see and then handle. We won't handle the error message in this demo, but the important thing to know is that this message is not to be displayed for the users, it's just for the developer to see. And finally, we will have to export this. So export default store reducer. Just a bit on exports. Export by itself is a named export, and export default is officially called default export. They were part of the JavaScript ES6 update, and it's just two different ways of exporting a module from a file. I've linked some articles and documentation below to better distinguish the two. But in brief, there is only one default export per file, and the naming of it when you're importing it is completely independent. So when you're importing, you can use any name you like. Named exports are useful to export several values, and the name must stay the same when importing from a different file. Now, back to our store context. We can initialize our useReducer now. So const state, dispatch equals useReducer, which accepts two arguments, the reducer function and the initial state, which we can just import from reducer.js, like this. Okay, now that's all set up, we can get to the more juicy stuff. So what happens when we add an item to basket? We have a callback function called addToBasket that accepts a product, and then we set updatedBasket as the current state of our array of products, i.e. state.products. Because we want to add an item to that array, we can just push our product into the array like this. updatedBasket.push product. This product will be whatever we feed into the parentheses when this function is used later. So you'll see a bit later on. And then we can dispatch our action object. Its type is add, and the payload is just this new updated basket, which, if you remember from the reducer function, we are setting the array of products as the payload. And here what we're saying is that the payload is just this updated basket whenever we are updating the basket when we add a new item. And that's it. Remove from basket is very similar. We accept a product, whatever product we later feed into it basically. And then for our updated basket, my personal favorite is the splice method, but just to switch it up a bit, we can do filter. So we have our current array of products, state.products, and then we use the filter method, where we're creating a shallow copy of the given array, filled with elements that pass a test provided by a function. So first we give it the element to be processed in the array. Let's call it current product. We check that the current product name is not equal to the product name. So then our new array will not contain the product that we're feeding through, hence it will have been removed. And this new array is what our updated basket is. Between filter and splice, which is faster, I believe most of the time it's splice, but only by a little bit. In our dispatch action object, we have the type of remove, and our payload is again just our updated basket. And lastly, update price, which will take our array of products, and let's say total is 0. Then for each product price in this array of products, we just add it up like this. In our dispatch action object, the type is update price, and the payload is this new total. Then for each remove from basket and add to basket, we just need to apply this price update function to the updated basket in each scenario. The updated basket array is the array of products that we're feeding into this update price function. So each time an item is added to or removed from the basket, the total amount will be updated automatically. The final step is to return our store context provider with a children in between. When we apply this context.provider, the children will be the router and routes and root. So that's basically what it's covering off. And the context provider always has a value. In this case, our value will consist of total, which is whatever our current total amount is at any given time. So state.total. We'll have products, which is state.products, the current array of products at any given time. And we also want the add to basket function as well as the remove from basket function. Then we go to app.js and wrap our context provider around the router. If we compare this with what we did in the useContext demo, you'll see that we can use just the store provider here because we returned the storeContext.provider with the values provided in our storeContext.js file within that store provider that we exported. And now the difficult part is done. From here onwards, you'll see how easy it is to start using these values and functions. Let's go into product.jsx. And on click of the add to basket button, we can handle add, which will be a callback function. We need to get the add to basket function from our store context. To do so, we just do const add to basket in curly braces equals useContext and store context. VS Code usually automatically import it for us, so that's great. And in our handle add function, all we need to do is use the add to basket function from our store context, feeding in the specific item that we pass through to our product.jsx, and that's it. No passing states down component trees or writing new functions. All that hard work was done beforehand. If we go into our basket.js, we can go ahead and display our new array of products that we have added to our basket. Let's have the navbar first, and let me just move our store name into our navbar so it can be displayed as part of the navbar and I don't have to keep copying and pasting. There we go. Then we probably want to tell the user the total amount in their basket. Let's say a h3 tag with your basket and then a p tag with total and the currency. To display the total price, we can just grab that from our store context. Const total in curly braces equals useContext and store context. And then down here next to our currency, we can just add total in curly braces here, next to the pound sterling sign. You can see that it's showing up with £0 because we've not added anything to our basket yet. So that's good news. Let me just update the styling a little bit. To display the items in our basket, we just need to get products from our store context and then map it. Often the basket is displayed in a different format, so let's have a new component called basketproduct.jsx. And then back in our basket.js file, we pass down the key and each product into our basketproduct.jsx. We accept each product in our basketproduct.jsx and then let's display it. Image first. Then the item name. And item price. If we go into our browser and add a couple of items into the basket, Aha, we can see it. We need to sort out this total price bit, but how cool is that? To fix the price to show only 2 decimal points, after the item.price, we just need to do dot to fixed and then number 2 in the parentheses. This is for the price of each item in the basket. We'll add this to fixed method to the basket total a bit later because we still got a bit more work to do in this file. For example, we need to add a remove button, add some styling, To add the functionality of removing an item, on click of the button, we want to handle remove. To handle remove, we need remove from basket from our store context. And then we just need to add remove from basket into our handle remove function, feeding it with the item that was passed down to our basket product.jsx from basket.js. If we go back to our basket.js, we can tidy up the styling a bit more and try it out. If we remove an item, you can see the product is gone and our total amount is updated automatically. We can see that we've got nearly the equivalent of a physical store soft launch if we had a payment handling mechanism. What that means is the functionality is all there, but everything just needs a little bit more finessing. For example, a nice to have is to see the basket displaying how many items are in the basket. So when we add a new item, we can see a change to show that it's been successfully added into the basket. This is actually quite easy to do. In our navbar component, in our basket link here, we can just add a nested span. We can get the array of products from our store context. And in our span, we just need to show products.length. You can see it's showing up as 2 because we've got 2 items in our basket. Let's decorate it a little bit. So it's got a nice round superscript number. There we go. It just feels that much better in terms of user experience, right? Now we have the add to basket and remove from basket working. If we add the to fix method to our total price here in basket.js, and that's how useContext and useReducer can be used together. See you next time.